Las Vegas, 1966. The Sands Hotel showroom was packed with 1,200 people watching Dean Martin perform his midnight show. The audience was having a great time. Dean was in top form, singing, joking, making everything look effortless like he always did. But backstage, something was wrong. 3 men in dark suits had walked past security like they owned the place. They weren't there to enjoy the show. They were there to deliver a message to Dean Martin from Chicago, and the message wasn't friendly. The men waited in the wings until Dean finished his song. Then, as the applause died down, they walked onto the stage. Right onto the stage, in front of 1,200 witnesses. The lead man, an enforcer named Vincent Maroney, put his hand on Dean's shoulder. Not friendly, possessive, threatening. The showroom went silent. Dean's smile froze. Everyone could sense something was very wrong. Security was moving, but they were too far away. Dean was trapped on stage with 3 dangerous men, and nobody knew what was about to happen. That's when a voice boomed from the back of the showroom. A voice everyone recognized. "Martin, you forgot to introduce your special guest." John Wayne stood up from his table and started walking toward the stage. The Duke, America's cowboy, 6'4", 250 pounds of pure presence. And he was walking with purpose, his eyes locked on the 3 men surrounding Dean. What happened in the next 3 minutes would become legendary in Las Vegas history. A moment when Hollywood's toughest cowboy faced down real gangsters and changed everything. Before we reveal what John Wayne did and why those gangsters left the stage without touching Dean, hit that like button and subscribe. This is a true story about courage, loyalty, and why some men become legends. Comment if you're a John Wayne fan. ***. Las Vegas in 1966. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand Las Vegas in the 1960s. It wasn't the corporate, family-friendly destination it is today. It was a city built and controlled by organized crime. The major casinos, the Sands, the Desert Inn, the Riviera, the Flamingo, they all had mob connections. Chicago controlled several properties. New York had their interests. The Kansas City mob had their piece. These weren't silent partners. They were actively involved in daily operations, skimming profits before they got reported to the IRS, using the casinos to launder money from their illegal operations. The entertainers who performed in Vegas knew the score. You didn't ask questions about who really owned the casino. You did your shows, you got paid, and you minded your business. Most of the time, it worked out fine. The mob guys loved having big stars perform in their clubs. It brought in high rollers, gave them legitimacy, made them feel like respectable businessmen. But sometimes, things got complicated. Sometimes, the mob wanted more than just a performance. They wanted favors. They wanted the entertainers to use their connections, to introduce them to politicians or other celebrities, to help them expand their influence. And when the mob wanted something, they usually got it. Dean Martin had walked this tightrope his entire Vegas career. He was friendly with mob figures. You couldn't avoid it in his business, but he kept his distance. He performed. He got paid. He went home. He didn't get involved in their business, and he made it clear he expected them not to involve him in theirs. Dean was smart about it, recalled a Vegas insider. He was charming with the mob guys, made them feel special, but he never owed them anything. He never took loans from them, never asked for favors, never got in debt. That was his protection. But protection only goes so far when you're dealing with men who aren't used to hearing no. The Chicago connection. The 3 men who walked onto Dean's stage that night were from Chicago. The leader, Vincent Maroney, was a high-ranking enforcer for Sam Giancana's organization. Giancana was one of the most powerful mob bosses in America, controlling gambling, prostitution, and various other operations throughout the Midwest. Giancana had connections to Frank Sinatra, which by extension made connections to the Rat Pack. But Giancana wanted more. He wanted the entertainers to be his instruments, his way into political circles, his ticket to respectability and power beyond the underworld. Dean Martin had always resisted this. Unlike Frank, who had complicated relationships with mob figures, Dean kept everything strictly business. He'd perform at mob-owned casinos, but he wouldn't be their errand boy. A few weeks before this incident, Giancana had sent word that he wanted Dean to introduce him to a senator who was going to be in Vegas. Dean had politely declined. "I don't mix business with politics," he told the messenger. "Tell Mr. Giancana I'm happy to perform for him anytime, but I don't get involved in other matters." That refusal had not been well received. Giancana was used to getting what he wanted, and when he didn't, he sent people like Vincent Maroney to remind you of your obligations. The threat that had been building. For 2 weeks before that night, Dean had been receiving messages, phone calls to his house, notes delivered to his dressing room, all of them saying the same thing. Giancana wanted that introduction. Dean needed to cooperate. It would be in his best interest to say yes. Dean had ignored them all. He'd even joked about it with Frank Sinatra. "These guys don't quit, do they? They think because I sing in their casinos, they own me." "Be careful, Dino," Frank had warned. "These aren't people you want to antagonize." "I'm not antagonizing anyone," Dean had replied. "I'm just doing my job and nothing else. They'll get over it." But they hadn't gotten over it, and now Vincent Maroney had decided to deliver the message in person, on stage, in front of an audience, partly to intimidate Dean and partly to send a message to every other entertainer in Vegas. Nobody tells Sam Giancana no. Dean's security team had been watching for trouble, but Maroney had outmaneuvered them. He'd walked in with a legitimate ticket, sat through most of the show, then made his move when Dean was on stage and couldn't easily escape. By the time security realized what was happening, Maroney and his 2 associates were already standing next to Dean. John Wayne's presence. John Wayne wasn't supposed to be at the show that night. He'd come to Vegas to meet with some movie producers about a new Western. He checked into the Sands, heard that Dean Martin was performing, and decided to catch the midnight show. He and Dean weren't close friends, but they were friendly. They'd worked together on a few films, respected each other's work. Wayne was sitting at a table near the back of the showroom with his business associates. He'd been enjoying the show, laughing at Dean's jokes, appreciating his talent. Wayne had enormous respect for professionalism, and Dean Martin was nothing if not professional. But Wayne had also noticed the 3 men in dark suits. He'd been around Hollywood long enough to recognize a certain type. These weren't tourists. These weren't businessmen out for a night of entertainment. These were muscle, and they were focused on Dean in a way that made Wayne's instincts prickle. "Something's not right," Wayne had whispered to the man next to him. "Those 3 guys, they're not here for the show." When Maroney and his associates walked onto the stage, Wayne was already moving. His companions tried to stop him. "Duke, don't get involved. That's my business." But John Wayne didn't back down from trouble. Not in the movies, and certainly not in real life. "That's my friend up there," Wayne said. "And I don't care who those men work for." The confrontation begins. On stage, Vincent Maroney had his hand on Dean's shoulder. Up close, you could see the calculation in Maroney's eyes. He was enjoying this, the power, the fear he was creating, the knowledge that he could do whatever he wanted and nobody would stop him. "Mr. Martin," Maroney said, his voice carrying through the silent showroom, "we need to have a conversation. About your schedule. About some introductions you're going to make." Dean's face had gone pale, but he kept his voice steady. "Gentlemen, this isn't the time or place. If you want to talk business, call my manager." "We're talking now," Maroney interrupted. "You've been avoiding our calls. Mr. Giancana doesn't like being avoided." The audience was frozen. Most people didn't know exactly what was happening, but they knew it wasn't part of the show. The tension in the room was suffocating. Dean tried to step away, but Maroney's grip tightened. "Where you going? We're not done talking." One of Maroney's associates moved to Dean's other side. They were boxing him in. Security was trying to get through the crowd, but they were being blocked by other men, more of Giancana's people who'd been planted in the audience. This had been carefully planned. Dean was trapped, and everyone watching was about to witness what happened when you said no to the Chicago outfit. Wayne takes the stage. That's when John Wayne reached the stage. He didn't ask permission. He didn't wait for an invitation. He just walked up the steps with that distinctive Wayne swagger, a walk that had intimidated outlaws in dozens of movies and was about to intimidate some real-life criminals. "Martin," Wayne's voice boomed across the showroom. "You forgot to introduce your special guest." Every eye turned to Wayne. He was smiling that famous John Wayne smile, the one that was friendly and dangerous at the same time. The smile that said he was about to be your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on how the next few minutes went. Dean caught on immediately. "Duke, I didn't know you were here tonight." "Thought I'd surprise you," Wayne said, stepping between Dean and Maroney. It wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't subtle either. Wayne had positioned himself as a physical barrier between Dean and the mobsters. Maroney's face darkened. "This is a private conversation." "Doesn't look private to me," Wayne replied, gesturing to the 1,200 people watching. "Looks pretty public, actually. 1,000 witnesses and all." "This doesn't concern you," Maroney said, his voice hard. Wayne turned to face Maroney directly. Up close, the size difference was stark. Wayne was taller, broader, and carried himself like a man who'd never backed down from anything in his life. "Well, that's where you're wrong, friend. Dean here is my pal, so anything concerning him concerns me." The standoff, the tension on stage was electric. Maroney was clearly weighing his options. He hadn't expected interference, certainly not from John Wayne. His plan had been simple: intimidate Dean in public, make an example of him, force him to cooperate. But now America's most beloved cowboy was standing in his way. "Mr. Wayne," Maroney said, trying a different approach. "This is business. Private business. I suggest you go back to your table." "I suggest you get off the stage," Wayne replied calmly. "Show's not over. Dean's got more songs to sing. And you three are ruining the evening for all these nice people who paid good money to be here." Maroney's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be the first time," Wayne said with a slight grin. "But here's what I know about mistakes. They're a lot easier to walk away from than they are to push forward with. So why don't you boys take a walk, let Dean finish his show, and we'll all forget this ever happened." "It doesn't work that way," Maroney said. "We came here to deliver a message." "Message delivered," Wayne interrupted. 1,000 people saw you walk up here. Everyone knows you want to talk to Dean. Point made. Now you can leave with dignity. Or you can leave embarrassed. Your choice. The calculation. Maroney was in a difficult position. He was used to people backing down, used to fear working in his favor. But John Wayne wasn't afraid. And more importantly, Wayne was famous. If Maroney did anything to John Wayne on this stage, in front of all these witnesses, it would be national news. The FBI would get involved. The heat would be intense. Giancana had always been careful about high-profile incidents. He preferred operating in the shadows. Having his men rough up John Wayne in a Las Vegas showroom would be the opposite of subtle. But backing down would be humiliating. Every mobster in Vegas would hear about it. Vincent Maroney, tough guy enforcer, chased off stage by an actor. "This isn't over," Maroney said to Dean, trying to save face. "Yes, it is," Wayne said firmly. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk off this stage. Dean's going to finish his show. And tomorrow, if there's business to discuss, it'll be discussed through proper channels. Like civilized people. Not like thugs disrupting a man's performance." The word thugs hung in the air. It was deliberate. Wayne was daring Maroney to escalate. And Maroney realized, with growing anger, that he couldn't. Not here. Not now. Not with the Duke standing between him and Dean Martin. Wayne's reinforcement. What Maroney didn't know, but was about to find out, was that John Wayne hadn't come alone. Several of Wayne's friends were in the audience that night. Other actors, stuntmen, crew members who'd worked with Wayne for years. They were all big men, all loyal to the Duke, and they were all standing up now, moving toward the stage. It wasn't threatening, not overtly, but suddenly Maroney and his two associates were facing not just John Wayne, but a small army of Wayne's people. The math had changed dramatically. "You're outnumbered," Wayne said quietly, so only Maroney could hear. "And you're outmatched. Not because you're not tough. I'm sure you are. But because you're in a room full of witnesses, dealing with someone who won't be intimidated, and you've got no good moves left. So take my advice, walk away. Live to fight another day." Maroney looked at Wayne for a long moment. Then he looked at Dean. Then at the crowd of Wayne's people gathering near the stage. Finally, he stepped back. "This isn't over," he repeated. "Yeah, you said that already," Wayne replied. "Get some new material." Maroney and his associates walked off the stage. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or remain silent. A few hesitant claps started, then grew into full applause as Maroney and his men left the showroom. The aftermath begins. Dean Martin stood on stage, still processing what had just happened. John Wayne had just faced down Chicago mobsters for him. The Duke had put himself at risk, real risk, to protect someone he barely knew. Wayne turned to Dean with a smile. "So, you gonna sing something or what? These people paid for a show." Dean laughed, partly from relief, partly from admiration. "What do you want to hear, Duke?" "Something patriotic," Wayne said. "I'm feeling patriotic tonight." Dean launched into God Bless America, and the entire showroom sang along. It was spontaneous, emotional, powerful. The tension that had gripped the room transformed into something else: pride, relief, unity. John Wayne stayed on stage for the rest of the show. He didn't perform, that wasn't his thing. But he stood there, arms crossed, a silent guardian, making it clear that anyone who wanted to get to Dean Martin would have to go through him first. The message sent. What happened that night sent shockwaves through Las Vegas. By the next morning, every mobster, every casino owner, every entertainer in town knew the story. John Wayne had stared down Vincent Maroney and Sam Giancana's organization, and he'd won. The implications were enormous. It showed that the mob's power in Vegas had limits, that someone with enough courage and enough public profile could stand up to them, that entertainers didn't have to live in fear of these men. "Before that night," recalled a Vegas performer who asked to remain anonymous, "we all felt like we were at the mob's mercy. They owned the casinos. They controlled everything. If they wanted something from you, you gave it to them or you dealt with consequences." But Wayne showed us that wasn't always true, that standing up was possible. Sam Giancana was reportedly furious when he heard what happened, but he was also practical. Going after John Wayne would bring too much heat. Wayne was too famous, too beloved, too American. The publicity would be devastating. The FBI would have no choice but to investigate thoroughly. So Giancana made a calculated decision: let it go. Dean Martin was officially off limits. The introduction to the senator would have to come through other channels. And Vincent Maroney was quietly reassigned to Chicago, his reputation damaged by his failure to complete a simple intimidation job: the private conversation. After the show, Dean and Wayne sat in Dean's dressing room, sharing a drink. Dean was still shaken, but he was also profoundly grateful. "Duke, I don't know what to say. You didn't have to do that." Wayne shrugged. "Sure I did. Couldn't just sit there and watch three goons push around a friend." "We barely know each other," Dean pointed out. "So, you're a good man doing honest work. Those clowns were trying to intimidate you. That's not right, regardless of who you work for or who they work for." Dean poured Wayne another drink. "You know they won't forget this. Giancana's not the forgiving type." "I'm not the forgetting type either," Wayne replied. "If they come after you again, you call me. Day or night. I'll be there." "Why?" Dean asked. "Why stick your neck out like this?" Wayne was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "You know what I've learned in 60 years on this planet? The only thing that matters is how you treat people when it costs you something. It's easy to be decent when there's no risk, but standing up when it's dangerous, that's what separates men from cowards." He took a sip of his drink. "Besides, I'm tired of watching these mob guys push people around. They act like they own everything, like everyone should be afraid of them. Well, I'm not afraid. And I figure if enough people stop being afraid, these guys lose their power." "You're talking about taking on organized crime," Dean said. "That's bigger than one confrontation in a showroom." "Everything big starts with one moment," Wayne replied. "One person deciding not to back down. Maybe tonight was that moment. Maybe it wasn't. But at least those three guys know that not everyone will roll over for them." The ripple effect. Wayne's intervention that night had consequences beyond just protecting Dean. Other entertainers in Las Vegas heard about it and found courage they didn't know they had. When mob associates came around making demands, some of them started saying no. Not all of them. Many were still too afraid, but enough to make a difference. Casino owners noticed too. The mob's absolute control was showing cracks. If John Wayne could stand up to them publicly and face no consequences, maybe the mob wasn't as untouchable as everyone thought. Within a year, the FBI had ramped up their investigation into mob activities in Las Vegas. Some historians believe that Wayne's very public confrontation played a role in giving federal authorities the confidence to push harder. If the Duke can stand up to them, so can we, one FBI agent reportedly said. The incident also changed Dean Martin's career. He'd always been successful, but after that night, he became known as someone with principles, someone who wouldn't be pushed around, someone John Wayne had deemed worthy of protection. His reputation soared. Dean became more than just an entertainer after that, recalled producer Greg Garrison. He became a symbol of independence. Other stars looked up to him because he'd faced down the mob. With Wayne's help, yes, but he'd been the one refusing to cooperate in the first place. Wayne and Dean's friendship. From that night forward, John Wayne and Dean Martin became genuine friends. They weren't as close as Dean was with Frank Sinatra, but there was a bond forged in that moment of danger that never went away. They'd call each other occasionally, get together when they were both in Los Angeles. Wayne would show up at Dean's Vegas show sometimes, and Dean would always acknowledge him from the stage. The Duke's in the house tonight, folks. The toughest man in America. And I should know, I've seen him in action. Wayne always downplayed his role in the incident. I just did what anyone would do, he'd say when people brought it up. But Dean knew better. Duke saved more than my night, Dean told an interviewer years later. He saved my dignity. He saved me from having to compromise my principles. He showed me that you don't have to bow to bullies, no matter how powerful they are. That's a lesson worth more than all the money in Vegas. When John Wayne died in 1979, Dean Martin attended the funeral. He didn't speak publicly, but he stood with Wayne's family, remembering the night a cowboy had stood up for him when nobody else would. The lesson about courage. What John Wayne did that night teaches us something profound about courage. Real courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite fear. Wayne knew who those men were. He knew what they were capable of. He knew that intervening could bring serious consequences. But he did it anyway. Because Dean Martin needed help. Because it was the right thing to do. Because someone needed to stand up and show that the mob's power had limits. Duke taught me that courage is contagious, Sammy Davis Jr. later said, reflecting on the incident. When one person stands up, it makes it easier for the next person to stand up. Wayne started something that night. He showed everyone that these guys could be challenged. This lesson applies far beyond Las Vegas in 1966. How many times do we see injustice and stay silent because speaking up seems dangerous? How many times do we watch someone being bullied and don't intervene because it's not our problem? How many times do we let fear dictate our actions instead of our principles? Wayne showed us that sometimes you have to put yourself at risk to do what's right. That standing up to power, even when you might lose, is what defines your character. The lesson about loyalty. Wayne barely knew Dean Martin. They'd worked together a few times, were friendly acquaintances at best. But when Dean needed help, Wayne didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate whether Dean was important enough to risk himself for. He didn't wonder what Dean could do for him in return. He just saw someone who needed help and provided it. That's the thing about the Duke. Actor James Stewart once said. He had this code. You didn't have to be his best friend. You just had to be a decent person in trouble. That was enough for Wayne to show up. This kind of loyalty not based on what you can get in return, but simply on human decency, has become increasingly rare. We live in a world that's transactional, where people calculate the benefit of every relationship. Wayne's actions remind us that real character is about helping people regardless of what they can do for you. The lesson about power. The mobsters who confronted Dean thought they had all the power. They had guns. They had money. They had organizations behind them. But they discovered that night that there's a different kind of power, the power of moral authority, public reputation, and sheer personal courage. John Wayne had no weapons on that stage. He had no organization backing him up. What he had was his reputation, his presence, and his willingness to stand firm. And in that moment, those things were more powerful than everything the mob had. Power isn't just about force. Wayne once said in an interview, "It's about will. If your will is stronger than someone else's, if you refuse to be intimidated, you have power. Simple as that." This is a lesson that applies to every power dynamic in life. Bosses who bully employees, politicians who abuse their authority, anyone who uses their position to push others around. They only have power if people accept that they have power. The moment someone refuses to be intimidated, the dynamic changes. The lesson about standing alone. When John Wayne walked toward that stage, he didn't know if anyone would back him up. His friends eventually joined him, but in that initial moment, he was alone. One man facing 3 mobsters in front of 1,000 witnesses. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't organize a group first. He just stood up and moved. This is how most acts of courage happen. Not with careful planning and group consensus, but with one person deciding in a moment that something needs to be done and doing it. The group support often comes after someone takes that first brave step. I learned from Wayne that waiting for everyone else to act means nothing gets done. Dean Martin later reflected, "Someone has to go first. Someone has to take the risk." That night, Duke was that someone. And because he went first, others followed. That's leadership. The lesson about reputation. Part of what made Wayne effective that night was his reputation. He wasn't just some random guy interfering in mob business. He was John Wayne, the Duke, America's cowboy, the man who'd played heroes in countless films. His public image carried weight. But here's the thing about reputation. It has to be earned. Wayne's reputation for toughness, integrity, and courage didn't come from nowhere. It came from decades of consistent behavior, both on and off screen. He built a public persona based on standing up for what was right, and that persona gave him leverage in real-life situations. Your reputation is built one choice at a time. Wayne once told a young actor, "Every time you do the right thing, even when it costs you, you're building something." And eventually, that something becomes powerful enough to change situations just by being present. The mobsters that night didn't just see John Wayne the actor. They saw decades of reputation standing against them. They saw the public relations nightmare that would come from touching America's most beloved cowboy. Wayne's reputation became a shield for himself and for Dean. The historical context. It's important to understand that 1966 was a turning point in Las Vegas history. The mob's control of the casinos was beginning to weaken. Howard Hughes would soon start buying up properties, bringing corporate ownership to Vegas. The FBI's investigations were intensifying. Public tolerance for organized crime was declining. Wayne's confrontation with Maroney happened at exactly the right moment. A few years earlier, it might have ended badly. A few years later, it wouldn't have been necessary. The mob's grip was loosening on its own. But in 1966, it was exactly the kind of public incident that accelerated changes already in motion. What Wayne did became a symbol, wrote a Las Vegas historian. It showed that the mob's era was ending, that their power to intimidate was fading, that regular people, well, famous people, but still, could stand up to them without consequences. It was a watershed moment. The personal cost. We should also acknowledge that standing up to the mob wasn't without consequences for Wayne. He received threats afterward. His family was worried. The FBI briefed him on the dangers. For years after, he had to be careful in Las Vegas, always aware that Giancana's people might try something when the public wasn't watching. But Wayne accepted these consequences as the price of doing the right thing. "If I'd sat in my seat and watched them push Dean around," he said, "I wouldn't have been able to look at myself in the mirror. That would have cost me more than any threat some gangster could make." This is the reality of courage. It often comes with a cost. Standing up has consequences. But as Wayne demonstrated, the cost of not standing up, the cost to your integrity, your self-respect, your sense of honor, is higher. The legacy. The story of John Wayne protecting Dean Martin from Chicago mobsters has been told. and retold for nearly 60 years. It's become part of Hollywood legend, part of Las Vegas history, part of both men's legacies. But beyond the story itself, there's a lesson that continues to resonate. Courage, loyalty, and integrity matter. They mattered in 1966, and they matter today. When you see someone who needs help, you help them. When you see injustice, you stand against it. When bullies try to push people around, you get in their way. These aren't complicated principles. They're simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. It took courage for Wayne to walk onto that stage. It took courage for Dean to refuse the mob's demands in the first place. It takes courage for any of us to stand up when it would be easier to sit down. If this story inspired you, if it reminded you that one person can make a difference, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message about courage and standing up for what's right. Comment below. Would you have done what John Wayne did? Be honest. Remember, real courage isn't about fighting battles you know you can win. It's about standing up even when you might lose. Real loyalty isn't about helping your best friends. It's about helping anyone who needs it, simply because it's right. Real power doesn't come from threats or force. It comes from character, reputation, and the will to stand firm. John Wayne showed us what it means to be a hero in real life, not just on screen. Dean Martin showed us what it means to have principles you won't compromise. Together, they showed us that ordinary moments can become extraordinary when someone has the courage to do the right thing. The mob thought they owned Las Vegas. They thought everyone would bow to their power. But they learned that night that some things can't be intimidated. Personal courage, moral conviction, and John Wayne walking toward you with that look in his eye. Don't wait for someone else to stand up. Don't assume someone else will intervene. Be the person who gets up from their table and walks toward the trouble. Be the person who stands between the bully and their target. Be the person who refuses to let fear dictate your actions. Be like the Duke. Stand up, stand firm, and never, ever back down from doing what's right just because it's dangerous. Rest in peace, John Wayne and Dean Martin. That night in 1966, you showed the world what real men look like. Not movie heroes. Real heroes. The kind who stand up when it matters. Who protect those who need protecting. Who face down evil with nothing but courage and conviction. That's a legacy worth remembering. That's a lesson worth learning. That's the kind of men we should all aspire to be.